In this video, we're going to be learning about how to do quadratics. And the first thing you want to remember is that sine 2 can be written as 2 sine cosine, and cosine 2 can be written as cosine squared minus sine squared, 1 minus 2 sine squared, or 2 cosine squared minus 1. Now, keeping that in mind, for A, we're going to first rewrite sine 2 as 2 sine cosine plus sine equals 0. Now from there we're going to be taking out a sine, and when we take out a sine we're going to be left with 2 cosine plus 1 equals 0. Now from there sine is going to equal 0, and cosine from this is going to equal negative 1/2. Now on a circle, sine equals 0 is going to be right here and right here, which is going to be 0, pi, and 2 pi. Now for cosine equals negative 1/2, that's going to be right here and right here, where cosine equals negative 1/2. And that's going to be 2 pi over 3 and 4 pi over 3, or it can be written as plus or minus 2 pi over 3. For B, we're going to turn sine 2 into 2 sine cosine, and when you take that and times it by 2 sine, you're going to get 4 sine squared times cosine equals 3 cosine. Then you're going to subtract 3 cosine from either side of the equation to get 4 sine squared times cosine minus 3 cosine equals 0. Now once you do that, you're going to take out a cosine, which will get you 4 sine squared minus 3 equals 0. Now since we took out a cosine, cosine is going to equal 0, and sine is going to equal the square root of 3 over 2, and remember that it's going to be positive or negative since we square rooted it. Now on a circle, cosine equals 0 is going to be right here and right here, and those 2 points are pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Now positive or negative square root 3 over 2 is going to be all the over 3, so it's going to be right here, right here, right here, and right here. So it's going to be pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 4 pi over 3, and 5 pi over 3. And all those are going to be your answer to B. For C, what you're first going to want to do is you're going to want to rewrite cosine 2, and you're going to rewrite it as 1 minus 2 sine squared, because you already have a sine right here. And since you have a sine right here, you're going to times it by sine, so it's going to be 1 minus 2 sine squared times sine equals 0. Now from there, you're going to take out a sine, and once you take out a sine, you're going to get 1 minus 2 sine equals 0. Now since you took out a sine, sine is going to equal 0, and sine is going to also equal 1/2. Now on a circle, sine equals 0 is going to be right here and right here. Now you can write out 0, 2 pi, and pi, or you can just write pi n. And then for sine equals 1/2, it's going to be right here and right here. And that's going to get you pi over 6 plus 2 pi n and 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n. Now I want you to go ahead and see if you can do number D on your own. So pause the video and work it out by yourselves. Okay, so what you should have first done is you should have first rewritten cosine 2 as 1 minus 2 sine squared equals sine. And then, once you get that, you should have put 1 minus 2 sine squared on the other side of the equation and get 0 equals 2 sine squared plus sine minus 1. And then once you did that, you should have factored them to get 2 sine minus 1 and sine plus 1. And that'll get you sine equals 1/2 and sine equals negative 1/2. And from those two answers, you should have gotten pi over 6 plus 2 pi n, 5 pi over 6 plus 2 pi n, and 3 pi over 2 plus 2 pi n. Okay, so for 2a, you're going to notice that it has sine in parentheses pi plus theta. Now, this is a rap song, so in order to do this, you're going to need to remember the rap song for sine, which is sine times cosine plus cosine times sine. Now, when you write this out, you're going to get sine of pi times cosine plus cosine pi times sine. Now, sine of pi is right here, and the sine, which is either up or down, of pi is going to get you 0. So 0 plus the cosine of pi, which is negative 1, times sine is going to be 0 plus negative sine. Now, then you're going to see that cosine 2 can be rewritten as 1 minus 2 sine squared equals negative sine, and don't forget the negative 2, minus 2. From there, you're going to move 1 minus 2 sine squared to the other side of the equation, and you're going to get 2 sine squared minus sine minus 3. From that, you're going to need to factor it to get 2 sine minus 3 times sine plus 1. From there, sine equals 3 over 2, and from this, you're going to get sine equals negative 1. Now, on a circle, negative 1 is right there. So the answer is you're going to get is 3 pi over 2 plus 2 pi n. Now, for sine equals 3 over 2 is 1.5. And the reason that this does not work is because on a circle, the highest number you can get is either 1 or negative 1. An answer cannot be greater than 1. And because this is 1.5, it cannot work. So you're only left with 3 pi over 2. For b, what you're first going to want to do is you're going to rewrite sine 2 as 2 sine times cosine. Then you're going to take this and times it by cosine to get 2 cosine squared times sine equals sine. Now from there, you're going to subtract sine on both sides to get 2 cosine squared times sine minus sine equals 0. Then from there, you're going to take out a sine to get 2 cosine squared minus 1 equals 0. Then you're going to see that sine equals 0 and cosine is going to equal positive and negative 1 over square root 2. Now, 1 over square root 2 can be rewritten as positive or negative square root 2 over 2. Now keeping that in mind, now that we know that, we can see that sine to the 0 is just pi n. That's one answer. And then for the cosine equals positive or negative square root 2 over 2 on the circle, that's going to be all the pi over 4s because it's going to be right here, right here, right here, and right here. So you're going to get pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. Now I want you to go ahead and see if you can do number C on your own. So pause the video and see if you can get the right answer. What you should have done is you should have first rewritten sine 2 as 2 sine cosine. Timesing that by sine, you should have gotten 2 sine squared times cosine equals, and you should have written out the rap song for cosine as cosine 2 pi times cosine minus, because you have to remember the cosopposite, sine 2 pi times sine. From there, you should have gotten 2 sine squared times cosine equals cosine. Then you should have subtracted cosine on both sides to get 2 sine squared times cosine minus cosine equals 0. From there, you should have taken out a cosine to get cosine, in parentheses, 2 sine squared minus 1 equals 0. Cosine will then equal 0, and sine will equal positive or negative square root 2 over 2. Then you should have gotten the answers pi over 2 plus pi n, and plus or minus pi over 4 plus pi n.